Siemens door strip down with John Rorke.
Got a Siemens single oven and combi microwave. Basically, to take the door off this, I need to remove this top section here by pressing the little plug inside there, and then that'll lift off. Not easy trying to do it one-handed. Then I'm going to unscrew these here and take them out and lift the front cover off. And then, if you can see down here, there's a tiny little rocker switch. And you need to pull that up, and then that'll release the door. And then I'll go through taking the glass off. So as you can see, the two screws have come out either side, and I've lifted it up and off, and that's now there. So carefully holding that together, it shouldn't come apart. We turn the little rocker switches at the bottom, and then it should, with a bit of luck, slide off. Okay, so it did actually just slide off. I just needed to give it a bit of a pull. So now you've got the inner glass here, which is fastened on with this silver at the top and at the bottom. And basically, to get into that, you need to turn it over and take the frame apart. Moreover, there's this aluminium frame holding the inner glass. At the bottom here are two screws. And this is effectively the top of the door. So these two screws come out, and then at the bottom it's just sat into like a little clip, just sits into a hole, into a slot, so they just push in. So you take those screws out, lift those out of the slots, and then this piece of metal comes off, and then I can remove the inner piece of glass. So I've removed this piece of metal now by removing the two screws and unslotting the metal pins out of the slots here. Now, if you look on the glass, there's an arrow, so it's pointing this way towards the top of the door. So this piece of metal here needs to be coaxed out so that it's big enough to release the outer glass. But I wouldn't suggest taking it off altogether, because I think it'd be difficult to get back in underneath these clips at the side here. So what I do is basically just tease it apart like this, just enough to release the outer glass without actually taking it off. The top bit and the bottom bit, just enough to separate it so the bottom outside glass falls off. And what I recommend doing is always making sure that you keep them on top of each other, so you know which is the top and bottom, because otherwise it gets very confusing. So this piece of glass now can go out and be dipped. So to reassemble this door, you need to make sure all your glass is clean. Make sure you know which side is up and which side is the top. The bit with the screw and the arrow is going to be the top of the door. That's going to be the hinge end at the bottom. Okay. So basically what you need to do, if these are pushed in again, you need to open them up so that they're far enough apart so that you can get the glass in underneath, and then push them back together to close it together. Then the whole of that, this then sits on top of that. Those lock into those little clips at the top, and you have two screws to go in there. And then finally you put it on the door, and then the glass goes back on once it's in situ. So I'll just do that. Okay, so I've put the glass back in, push those back together so they're in, and the glass is held firmly back in its frame. Then you need to turn it over. On top, the holes at this end for the screws, and at this end there's a little slot there, and this notch sits into the slot. I don't think I can do that. Can I? There we go. Yeah, that pushes into the slot there. There we go. That's in place. Make sure it's tight. Pull it up so you can see the holes at the top, and then you just put the screws back into those. So there we go, the frame's back on, the screws are back in, at the top, and they're held in with the clips at the bottom. So that's now ready to go back on the door, and then we'll hang a piece of glass in the front once the door's back on the oven. So the frame just pushes back. These are the hinges here. The hinge bars just push up inside here and sit on this little ridge here. Okay, and then you need to pull it down and release those catches in the back corner there. See a little rocker catch that just goes up. There we go. And then the door should close up. Brilliant. And then you put the glass back on at the front. Here's the outer door glass. Handles up here. These bits will, where the grub screws go back in at the side, these bits hook into these little hooks down here at the bottom of the door. So the bottom hooks onto there, the top pushes into there, and then a grub screw goes through the holes either side to hold them on. Right, so once you've tightened these grub screws up, it's one of those jobs where you need 3 hands, because you need to hold the grub screw, the screwdriver, and also don't let go of the glass, because I'm really paranoid about dropping it. It's only hooked in with the hooks at the bottom until these screws are in. So once they're in, it's just a case of clicking the top bit of trim back in. But sometimes that's a bit tricky on these, and you might need to loosen the grub screws to get them in. Yeah, this one's looking a bit tight, so you might need to just loosen the grub screw now clicking. So you make sure those clips are in at the bottom, so you've got a tight seal up there. And if that's pushed in far enough, you can see the hole that the grub screw needs to screw into. But also you need to get this in as well. Sometimes you can get one side in but not the other, and then you get that side in and this side won't go in. So you need to loosen the grub screws off, push it halfway in, get the holes lined up, put the screws in loosely, click that down completely, and then finally tighten the grub screws up. It's just a case of jiggling and fiddling around until you get it to work, but it's really complicated. Sorry guys. Anyway, there we go, all back together. Now the top door, the mechanism is exactly the same, but there's actually a screw about halfway along under here that locks it onto there, so you can't actually usually get it off.